Well, I know a guy that we can go to for this, and I'm curious.
Yes,
I know
sir.
Dion probably been trying to calm the crowd down on his own YouTube channel, which you can check out, by the way, Dose of Dion 2.0, but he is joining the program. Welcome to the
Shout
show,
out.
Dion. We appreciate you for taking the time. Dion, how you doing today? What's the vibe like for you as a Lions fan, someone who covers the Lions?
Man, I'll say
Going through
this.
your head.
First off, the energy. Can y'all hear me? Am I good?
Yes, you're
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
You're perfect. You're good,
Okay. I bet the mic's been acting goofy today, so I was trying to test it behind the scenes, make sure that green thing moves. Man, first off, the energy's great. I joined in, the conversation was popping, so I love to see that. I'm feeling good, man. I mean, free agency is a blast, dude. It's during the season is awesome. I like, during the game and everything like that, but then it's automatically like you're on to the next game. So it's always weird trying to find that balance. But during the offseason, you kind of can't lose. Like, in a way, you can always talk yourself into like, this was really good. Well, at the same time, it just never ends. So I love it. I love the randomness of it. I'm having a lot of fun.
Well, Dion, I'll start off by asking you this, and I'll get right into it. I mean, let's just get right to it. Danielle Hunter signed with the Houston Texans. I know that was somebody that people have talked about. Patrick Mahomes restructuring his contract, so assuming they're going to try and re-sign L'Jarius Sneed. What are your thoughts on kind of the Lions free agency approach? Because I said this, Brad told everybody what the plan was. But what's your take on it? Did the Lions miss out? Or you think they're still on track to have success heading into next season and kind of build off what they did this year? Where are you at?
Yeah, that's actually a good point because you're right. Brad Holmes did lay that out, that it was going to be like what we've done to this point, and they've done exactly that. I'll say this first off, just on the Danielle Hunter thing, I may be my own kind of category here. I really wasn't like super interested in bringing him in just in general. That's not to say that I'm like the one that's sitting here like Danielle Hunter isn't actually good. No, he's awesome. But at the same time, like, I didn't really see the vision for doing that necessarily. Like, to me, that didn't make sense. And for a while now, like, there's been a couple moves that have gotten me. I know last time I was on here, I brought up Van Ginkel. So to see the dang Minnesota Vikings just, man, I mean, day one, what are we doing? They're just taking our guy, and we were just kind of chilling for a minute. So a couple of those stung a little bit. But honestly, like, there hasn't been a lot of splashes that I'm sitting there like, I don't know why we didn't do anything, because to what you just said, this is the expectation coming in. So I'm just like rolling exactly with what I expected to happen. Nothing's really changed that. I love the additions that they made. I think they've addressed the right positions. But then also on top of that, like, guys, for example, like Danielle Hunter, I'll just say this because I just want to mention the Danielle Hunter fact just in general. I look at this defense, and I think the Lions believe they have a lot of their answers already here. Aiden Hutchinson, of course, is an answer. I think Josh Pascal, they really do buy. He's going to be a big part of the future. That's why, you build through the draft, you invest a second-round pick. These guys are hoping are going to be part of the future. I think about the Levi situation. We didn't immediately last offseason as much. We were like, okay, we really got to figure that out because we haven't seen Levi yet. They still left the door open for him to get opportunity. When you buy into we're going to build through the draft, you have to have a path for them to actually play. And I think once you start to stack players on top of that in free agency, you're not leaving any kind of room for those guys to get snaps. So for me, I really feel like across the board, they have a lot of their answers lined up for the future. They can still add to that. But with the Marcus Davenport signing that's thrown in there too, I love what the Lions have going.
Dion, I tuned into your show earlier today, so I have an idea of, I feel like, where you're going to go with this answer. But kind of going forward in free agency, there are still a couple needs here on the Lions team. Who is like your number one right now going forward for the next couple weeks before the draft? Because I still feel like there's a lot of names out there that people aren't talking about. Do you have one or two people that you're kind of having like on your eye there that you want the Lions to go after?
Yeah, I mean, I probably have similar names to you guys. Of course, the positions that stand out, guard. Now, I think with where guard is at right now in free agency, I don't know that there's a ton of answers in terms of like, this guy's probably going to be the starter future-wise. Maybe there's a couple guys that could step in and you could feel okay with them starting, but you'd still definitely want to address that in the draft. So I don't know that those guys are even out in free agency anymore. For me, though, just looking at the board, first off, safety's still extremely deep. So that's one of those spots that just, you haven't seen a ton of guys come off the board. I think at some point, probably a little later, we need to add to that, just get some depth. But yeah, for me, it's the interior defensive line. I see chat saying it. Like DJ Reader coming in. And again, I don't necessarily expect them to do this because I feel like Lee McNeil's going to get a pretty big contract. I could be off on that. But with the contracts that they have coming into play here, I don't really expect it. But DJ Reader is my top defensive tackle joining free agency for the Lions. So he would still be up there. Armstead getting let go right before free agency took place. I'd love to add him to the mix. And to me, it's like, defensive line, I'm really never mad with continuing to add to that. So I always keep Calais Campbell kind of in mind. But for me, it's really the interior, because I think to me, the glaring spots are, it's the interior defensive line where it's like, hey, we need a pressure piece, but we also need a run defender because we're not really sure with Broderick here. Well, at the same time, I'm keeping an eye on receiver because I think receiver market is super thin right now at the top. And I think part of the reason probably that Josh Reynolds hasn't done anything yet, I still think he ends up back with us. But you look at that receiver market, there's just not a lot of big names out there. I understand that the draft looks good, but he could be arguably the second best receiver that's just available right behind, I forget his name, Calvin Ridley. So it was like, hey, take your time, man, see what you can get. So that's the one I'm really curious about. But yeah, for me, it's those two guys on the interior defensive line.
And I asked the fellas this question yesterday just because I think as the days go on, if they don't make a move at the defensive end spot, I feel like it's the path that it's almost like has to go down. Do you think there's a situation, Dion, where the Lions may add another corner as far as just a depth piece? Because I like the moves they made already as far as starting caliber players. They dress guard maybe. I don't see it happening, but let's just say they do. Do you think there's a way that defensive end doesn't get addressed again until the draft, and that's what they end up spending the first round pick on?
Man, yeah. Well, I'll say this. I think that there's a real chance that the Detroit Lions don't hit defensive end again in free agency. I would actually lean towards believing that that's the case, that they don't get another defensive end in here. Now, to your point about that leading then to the topic of the draft, I think that's a real possibility. For me, I mean, the Josh Reynolds one is going to completely impact whether or not that receiver even becomes a conversation within the first round. And then outside of that, like you said, with interior defense, offensive line, you don't really see them addressing it. I don't see the future on the market. So you're going to have to hit that somewhere pretty high in the draft. So I'm leaving that possibility out there. But at the same time, like I could see both scenarios where the Lions don't touch DN again. They come back in the draft and it's not their first pick. That maybe it's something that happens mid rounds, mid to late, to be honest with you. I don't think, and I could be way off on this because usually when I say things like this that I really do believe, I come back and by the time you end this show, the Lions will have signed 2 defensive ends. 2 deep, but hey, chat, put the ideas in there right now. But seriously, I think that they feel good with where they're at on the defensive line. I just don't feel great about the interior right now.
Yeah, in Dion too. I mean, just to kind of recap some of what they have done, and I'll ask you about Carlton Davis, Marcus Davenport. We'll get to the corner also that he signed today, which you fellas can ask. I want to ask you because the talk, really the Marcus Davenport thing, we'll start with him. People are bringing up the injury concerns. He had obviously a breakout season when he was kind of healthy with Dan Campbell. I believe he was there. Might not have been, regardless, with the Saints. What are your thoughts on the Davenport signing? A 1-year flyer? Where are you at with that?
Yeah, it's the Brad Holmes move, right? It's the Brad Holmes way, man. Go give a 1-year deal to a guy that's young enough, or if he balls out, we extend him, and then he becomes part of the core plan. Here's what I think that can be missed with some of these 1-year deals. You guys probably already talked about this, but when I think about it, it's when we start to talk about we want to extend our guys, and now we're getting to that point where these draft classes they're looking for new deals. From now on, every single year, we're going to be talking about this. We didn't really have to deal with this in the past. Now it's going to become a thing. And I think these 1-year deals become very important because it opens up the door where if I go out and give that 3-year deal and he's 31 years old next year and he gets hurt, or maybe he just starts to decline, now I got to start to figure out, okay, well, how do I deal with that? Because usually, money becomes fully guaranteed like halfway through contracts. So I got to figure out how to deal with it. Now giving out these 1-year deals allows them that ability to say, you're not a core piece yet, but the potential is still there. And this just feels like taking that kind of to the next level from the Emmanuel Mosley edition or the Charles Harris edition. It's like the next step up. Like this guy has actually shown really good on-field production when healthy for multiple seasons. It wasn't like a 1-year stretch or like Charles where it was like, didn't really ever see it in the NFL. He was just good in college. We've actually seen this in the NFL. He just needs to be healthy. And last year was a mess with Minnesota. He just didn't really play at all from like ankle injuries. So I really liked it because I think it does give a really good offset to Aiden Hutchinson. I think when you look at the skill set that he brings, I think when you look at the fact, well, he consistently lines up against your left tackle too, and he brings a lot of flexibility. So we're talking about edge rushers. Like he could play as a 4 down front a lot of times, just as an opposite defensive end, but he also seemingly gives you some of that flexibility too. He could play stand up like he did back in college. He could put his hand in dirt, play some of the Kaminsky role. So I think he checks a lot of boxes there. And you're right. He was with Dan Campbell. They had a connection. And I think that becomes massive because one other name that I was interested coming into free agency, but I'm starting to get kind of second thoughts of is Sheldon Rankins. To me, it's going to be very simple, right? If they're interested in Sheldon Rankins, they'll probably get a deal done because they got a connection with him. But then I step back and I kind of pull back to what Todd Wash, when he was first here and the Lions had that on their wall. I think it was on their wall. You got to have to earn the right to rush the passer. And it was like, hey, you got to stop the run first. And the Lions have never backed off that. Even last year when he wasn't there and they were telling Aleem, hey, it's great, man, you're slimming down. You still got to be able to handle the run. And I think for the Lions there, with a guy like this in particular, that's something that he still does really well. Like that's what he can bring first. So for me, I really like the deal. There's not much of a risk to it, obviously, because he's basically coming on a second prove it deal. And I think it fits well if it hits. And we've seen it hit with this coaching staff.
Yeah.
Dion, I think number one, and we probably all agree on this, the number one need this offseason was probably corner going into the offseason. Obviously, Carlton Davis trained for him, Amik Robertson. Are you where are you at with those signings there? You feel pretty comfortable with that, kind of just going forward with them, or you think they still kind of grab someone in the later in the draft to add to that? And obviously, you have, still pieces here with Emmanuel Mosley, who's coming off injury, and Cam Sutton. But are you comfortable with that kind of what they did there?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's still a draft pick for sure for the Lions. With that though, I don't know where. I mean, it still could be multiple, to be honest. It really just felt like a cleansing in a way. It was, hey man, we're resetting this whole cornerback room. We got one guy that we already paid, and we got Branch. Everything else, we're restarting here. We're figuring this out because this has been a mess since we've gotten here. With that though, I mean, I need to watch more Carlton Davis, I feel like. But again, if you're just looking at size, the complete offset and skill set that he brings for Cam Sutton, I think helps a ton. Well, at the same time, he still fits schematically and it makes sense stylistically. And he's played really well again, but he's kind of been dinged up here and there. So you got multiple guys now between him and Mosley that you kind of can expect are probably going to miss some time. And then to me, the Amik Robertson was probably my favorite signing to this point. I know there haven't been a ton, but that was my favorite one. You give him a 2-year deal. It's probably one of those things where they feel pretty comfortable with that signing. It's not a high price point, but Amik Robertson's been on the complete upswing these last couple seasons. Plus, you now add flexibility behind a guy like Brian Branch in the slot, which we didn't really have once you lost Will Harris and Chase Lucas and potentially Jerry Jacobs too as well. So to me, Amik Robertson is just trending the right direction. He's a Detroit Lion when you watch the guy play. So that was my favorite signing to this point. If I'll tell you this, if we came into a game next year and I asked everybody on the panel and look, they were healthy and you told me Carlton Davis was out there with Cam Sutton and Brian Branch, and those were my two backups, I feel really good about that cornerback room. It's purely just about health for me right now. I think that cornerback room is really strong. You don't have that typical number one, but how many of those guys are actually in the NFL? Like 3, 4, 5 in the entire NFL? They're just not there. So I like what we've done.
Yeah, Dion, and there's a lot to like around the NFL as far as what teams have done, but do you think there's a move in particular that you've seen that's kind of made you go, ooh, that's going to be a problem for the Lions as far as getting to the Super Bowl? Just any move around the NFC that kind of puts you on your toes a little bit as far as if they were the playoff matchup between the Lions and that team?
Yeah, Philly comes to mind because think about it line, man. That's gonna be something. But a lot of my confidence does come back to feeling like the cornerback room got a lot better recently here, and I think that was a big problem every time we faced them. Is like, okay, can we really match up AJ Brown and Devontae Smith? Like that was always a problem. So they stand out because if Saquon's healthy. I just want to see what that looks like. On the flip side, man, it's the NFC North. They've been kind of just rotating through running backs. I guess we started something because now everybody wants a running back. So we were on top of something there. We see you, Brad Holmes. Everybody's signing running backs. Last year was like no one can get a deal. Now everybody wants to deal with running backs, and we got our guys at good price points. But for me, I mean, not really. Not really. I mean, what we did last season, they took it way beyond my expectations. And now we're at a point where it's like, okay, I'm rolling with what you guys are doing. You guys clearly know what you're doing, so I'm going to let you roll with it. But I feel really good about it because when I look at us, I didn't see many weaknesses coming in offensively. To me, it's just, hey, you got to figure out the offensive line. We know that with Goff. But defensively, the biggest issue to me, they've addressed it.
Talk to him, dude. I like this.
That.
I like that. I like that energy.
I've been in a battle over here with people over that, so I love to hear that, man. Someone's on my side.
Well, Dion, I'll ask you this before we get you out of here. By the way, we appreciate you taking the time. I want to ask you, June coming up, cuts. Some players that could be dealt. We see the Chargers trying to deal Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, even though everyone knows they're going to have to eventually cut him. Do you kind of foresee the Lions kind of going in there and being like, hey, come over here. We'll maybe not trade for him, but anything regarding the June cuts? What's your kind of thoughts on that and how Lions?
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely, because this feels like that year, and you're talking about veterans a lot of times. This is absolutely the year where I think when you look at where the Lions are, that would be the one thing that they could really shake up. I think I've talked about this last time we were on here. It's like, go get that veteran signing now. Go get that player that's been in the league. He's ready to go win. Maybe he's getting let go because their team's salary cap situation, like you're bringing up. This is the time to do that, something that you really haven't done in free agency yet he could still fit into kind of the one-year plan for a lot of guys. But I will say this, because as much as I feel good about what the Lions have on the defensive line, especially on the outside, I will say I'm very curious about the James Houston situation. I don't know if you guys have seen anything yet there, but as an exclusive rights free agent, I haven't seen that they've done anything with that. And I'm just very curious because I understand Derek Barnes, right, for early downs, he could play that kind of role and it leaves a path for him. But to not bring back James Houston, if they decide not to bring back James Houston, then it feels like, okay, there's probably going to be someone sprinkled in here that they end up grabbing. And maybe that just opens up the draft pick for them to make it much more of a clear path for that guy to step in to what you guys said earlier. But I thought James would for sure be back. So that one's a little bit interesting to me. But yeah, keep an eye on the vets for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, honestly, I didn't even think about that. The James Houston stuff. I mean, until you brought that up, honestly, I didn't even think about it. That's a whole nother storyline within itself. I mean,
there has to be a deadline for that as well, too. And that has to be
Yeah, see, that's
So we
it's right
actually
here.
lose tomorrow. We
Yeah,
haven't
well,
heard that. That is kind of shocking.
well,
Cam,
Dion, we
KO'd.
appreciate.
I'm like, what's going on? My bad.
We-
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're good, man. We appreciate you. Great stuff today. Anybody, we have over 500 people watching. If you haven't seen Dion or Dion stuff, check him out. We'll have his link to his channel in the description. Dion, we'll talk to you soon, my friend. Hopefully, maybe we can recap the draft with you. Something. We got to do some more content together, but we appreciate you. Thank you.
Yes. Appreciate y'all, man. Have a good night. Don't let the haters hate, man. The Lions are going to the Super Bowl this year.
Hey, we're moving forward.
Let them know.
There you go.
Appreciate you, Dion.
There you go. Dose of Dion.
Appreciate
You
you,
can check
Dion.
his stuff out. Of course, he does great work. I think kind of from what he said, all the points he
Kills
made there. We are in lockstep kind of with him.